So, when you hear the name Einstein, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably the crazy hair, right? The brilliant mind, E equals mc squared. The man is literally a symbol for genius. But behind that public icon was a really complex and often a really troubled man. Today, we're going to explore the side of Albert Einstein they definitely did not teach you about in school.
All right, so first up, let's just set the stage with the image of Einstein we're all familiar with, the public legend.
For decades, we've celebrated him not just for, completely reshaping our understanding of the entire universe, but as this kind of secular saint. He's this warm, quirky grandpa figure, a champion for civil rights and world peace.
I mean, think about it. The man is so monumental that his very name has become shorthand for brilliance. History has put him on the highest pedestal imaginable, and look, in many ways for good reason. His scientific contributions are just undeniable. Okay, but here's where the story takes a turn. What if the private man, the one behind closed doors, was a totally different person? Well, thanks to the release of his private letters and diaries, a much darker, much more complicated picture of Einstein has started to come out, and it forces us to ask some really tough questions. Let's start in the one place where our private selves are often most on display, the family. For Einstein, this part of his life was, frankly, a story filled with distance and sometimes just outright cruelty.
Okay, so this is Mileva Marić, and it is absolutely crucial to understand she wasn't just Einstein's wife. No way. She was a fellow physicist, a brilliant intellectual peer who was right there with him during his early, most groundbreaking years. Some historians even argue about how much she actually contributed to his most famous work.
As their marriage was completely falling apart, Einstein gave Mileva this list, a set of conditions for them to keep living together. I mean, just look at these demands. This reads less like a marriage agreement and more like a contract for a servant. It is so cold, so controlling, and it just shows this profound lack of empathy for the woman who had been his intellectual partner. And it gets sadder. Before they were even married, Albert and Mileva had a daughter named Lieserl. Her existence was a secret for most of the 20th century. We don't know for sure what happened to her. She might have died as a baby or been given up for adoption. But the most telling and heartbreaking part of this whole story is that there is no record of Einstein ever, not once, seeing his first child. His relationship with his sons wasn't much better. His younger son, Eduard, struggled terribly with schizophrenia. And after Einstein moved to America, he never saw Eduard again. In a letter, he wrote this absolutely chilling line about his own son. It would have been better if he had never been born. Just an incredibly harsh, brutal thing to say, especially from a man who the world celebrated as a great humanitarian.
This emotional distance from his family, it also carried over to his romantic commitments, and that reveals another side of his private life, a pattern of, constant cheating.
So, while he was still married to Mileva, he began a relationship with his cousin Elsa. She would eventually become his second wife. But being married to Elsa didn't seem to change his behavior one bit.
6. That's the number of mistresses we know he had while he was married to Elsa. And he was surprisingly open about it. He even wrote letters to Elsa talking about all the different women who were, throwing themselves at him. And these weren't just casual flinks. His affairs included his own secretary and, most famously, a woman named Margarita Konenkova. Now get this, the FBI actually took an interest in their relationship because she was a suspected Soviet agent. Yeah, a pretty serious security concern during the height of the atomic age. But honestly, perhaps the most jarring contradiction of all comes from his own pen. In 2018, his private travel diaries from the 1920s were finally published, and they revealed some shockingly prejudiced views. First, let's just remember the public Einstein. After moving to America, he became a really vocal advocate for civil rights. He famously called racism a disease of white people and publicly supported figures like W.E.B. Du Bois. A real progressive, right?
Okay, now listen to this. In those private diaries from a trip through Asia, he wrote these deeply xenophobic and ugly things about the Chinese people he saw. It is a stark, shocking contrast that shows that even a mind as brilliant as Einstein's was not immune to the prejudices of his time.
So, how on earth are we supposed to reconcile these two completely different versions of the same person? You've got the scientific saint on one side and the flawed, often cruel private man on the other. It's an incredibly complicated picture.
And the strangeness of Einstein's legacy doesn't even stop when he dies. Oh no. In fact, what happened next gets even weirder.
Okay, get ready for this.
The pathologist who performed Einstein's autopsy, a guy named Thomas Harvey, literally stole his brain without any permission from the family. For decades, Harvey kept pieces of it in jars, driving it around the country in the trunk of his car, hoping he could discover the physical source of genius. It's a truly bizarre ending to a life that was already full of contradictions.
And this, right here, is the crucial takeaway. Albert Einstein was all of these things at once. He was the visionary scientist we celebrate, and he was the deeply flawed man who caused real pain to the people closest to him. The two sides don't cancel each other out. They have to exist together.
And that leaves us with a really difficult final question. When the myth of a great figure gets shattered, what are we left with? Is it possible to admire the genius while still acknowledging the cruelty? It's a question that isn't just about Einstein, but about how we choose to remember all the complex, messy, flawed heroes of our history.